Welcome. Good evening. Karen, are you available online to call our roll?
I am.
Thank you.
Correct.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I just adding the people that I just saw. So we have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines, Lori Connolly, Jay Funling is on Zoom. You have Andrew Coe there, Macy Lee, Peter Mon, Julia Maxwell is on Zoom, Brian McGuire is with you, and Judy Steele is on Zoom. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Karen. Welcome back, everybody, off of our annual town meeting. And today we're going to prepare for our June special town meeting. And we are fortunate to have Town Administrator Nick Milano and the Treasurer Joanna McCarthy here to present on some of the articles that we're going to see. As I indicated, I believe in my email, that the select board's going to be looking at some things this week and making some final votes on approximately 3 articles, I believe. So we're going to wait, but our town administrator has some things they'd like to present as the treasurer. So that being said, if Mr. Milano and Treasurer McCarthy, if you want to come to the table, thank you for being here very much.
Good evening. Sorry, I just got notification that another board committee is having some Zoom issues. I may have to come over to that for a moment.
Do you want me to help?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Thanks for the time, and as always, your assistance on working through these warrant articles, and I'll just do my, I think now, routine apology for the workload, I guess, that I am somewhat responsible for, or a lot of responsible for, but I appreciate it. So the June special town meeting, we have met with the select board about warrant articles. We do have a few that have been approved for inclusion. I'll just provide an overall update on the ones listed, and then we can go in a little bit more detail on a few that have already been included on the warrant. The first one is the reserve fund appropriation for $300,000. If, as you remember from the conversations about going into the May annual town meeting, that we had appropriated $700,000 in free cash to the reserve fund, which is controlled by this committee for extraordinary unanticipated needs. We had left $300,000 not appropriated, and that was at the select board's request. So we did prepare a warrant article to appropriate that remaining $300,000 into the reserve fund. There isn't a certain need for that right now, although, as you know, with your discussions with the school department, there may be a need for that based on the FY25 school budget. If that money is not appropriated into the reserve fund, at the end of the year, it would close out and start the basis for to get next year's free cash calculation. If it is appropriated to the reserve fund and not spent, then again, it would close out to free cash and start with the basis for next year's free cash calculation. So there isn't a lot of difference between leaving it unappropriated or moving into the reserve fund. If it's left unappropriated, it can't be touched because then it can only be moved by approval of the town meeting. If it's moved into the Warrant Committee's reserve fund, then any board or department of the town can request it for extraordinary unanticipated needs. We had talked about the select board about that appropriation. They voted to include it in the warrant. As tides have kind of come and gone with MBTA communities, I did include it on the select board's agenda for discussion on Wednesday night because based on some just kind of the public comments that folks have made that there is an interest in continued work on MBTA community zoning. I'm going to discuss with the select board whether it makes sense to set aside some of that $300,000 for additional planning work and necessary studies related to MBTA communities. So there isn't a change to that right now. I just did want to flag it as something that could come up. So on the one hand, it's a straightforward warrant article. On the other hand, it may be changed on Wednesday, so I apologize for that. But needless to say, there will be a warrant article to appropriate some amount of money to the reserve fund. Right now, it's 300. It may be reduced to 200. So that's one that's kind of in flux.
So 100,000 of planning activities?
I just am using that as an example of a round number. I haven't kind of mapped that out. It's just as kind of back of the envelope right now. There is at least one study that's required to increase the amount of affordable housing that we can require as part of this project. And under the regulations, the maximum you can do is 10% unless you have an economic study showing that the market will tolerate a higher amount. So at the very least, we do want to get that accomplished with whatever is approved. But I just put that out there as kind of in the works, not yet done. Light trespass, this committee is well informed about light trespass and been involved in that. The select board has not taken any action on that. It is on our agenda for discussion on Wednesday night. We'll talk momentarily about the third one on the agenda, which is about denial or revocation of licenses and permits for failure to pay taxes.
May I ask you
Sure.
just a quick question about light trespass? Is the select board gonna take a vote on the article itself, or is it just are they just gonna be vote to move it on to the committee?
Typically, they would hold back on whether to support the article or not. Is that something this committee would find helpful?
Well, I just didn't know, it's just a reconstituted select board. I didn't know, given it, the nature of the bylaw, I
Sure.
just didn't know if they were gonna give us some direction, but
Okay.
that can wait.
We can, and I can be sure to bring that up on Wednesday night as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah, the third one we'll talk about in a moment. The fourth one with the property tax exemptions we can speak about in a moment. I'm just going through based on the agenda. Fifth one we can come back to. The sixth one, which is alcohol on town property. The select board did discuss that last week, and they seem disinclined to put that on the warrant at this time until some more work, until it's in a more final place. I will note that Richard Wells was not at our last meeting, and he's been one of the more vocal advocates for this. So it is on our agenda for further discussion Wednesday, but the initial discussion was not quite ready. Let's get it right and bring it to a future town meeting in the fall, potentially.
Similar to light trespass.
That wasn't necessarily the conversation, but
Maybe you could suggest that?
sure. The next two are the East Milton Overlay District and the floodplain zoning articles, which I know this committee has heard from the planning board on. Those remain in going forward on the warrant. The last item on the agenda is the article related to MBTA communities. So where that stands, in case folks aren't aware, is there is an article related to MBTA communities that has been submitted by the planning board that is a zoning district and sub-districts with parameters that would result in housing zoned capacity for housing units at 10% of our total housing unit counts, which would mean Milton is zoning for an adjacent community status. Under the regulations, Milton is currently deemed to be a rapid transit community, which means we have to zone for 25% of the household count. The planning board, and as folks are well aware of the public discussion around this matter, at this time has submitted an article for 10% adjacent community compliant zoning. That has zoning text, zoning map, which I will distribute. The zoning text was with the planning board for one last read through, so I will get that out to the committee. In addition, today we received a citizens petition citizens petition for a special town meeting requires 100 signatures. We received a citizens petition today that appeared to have well over 100 signatures that would cross the threshold, but is with the town clerk's office for certification. That petition essentially takes the last presentation that UTEAL, the planning board's consultant, worked on with the planning board on May 8th and puts that behind zoning language with the zoning map and districts that were discussed by the planning board. So just if you're interested in seeing what that looks like on May 8th, UTEAL worked with the planning board on a bunch of zoning districts with unit counts. After that, UTEAL went back and came up with parameters that would translate those unit counts and those districts into zoning with the height and floor area ratio, open space requirements, and other inputs that would get you from the districts to the unit count. On May 8th, they talked about in that detail at the planning board meeting. You can see that and May 13th, they had submitted a slide deck that showed the work that they did in the intervening time period. Both of those presentations are available on the MBTA Communities page on the town website. The May 8th Planning Board meeting would be available through Milton Access TV. And I distributed a copy of the article late today to the chair and to Karen, so I'm sure she'll distribute that if she hasn't even done so already. So that's kind of the broad strokes on MBTA Communities.
Is the citizens petition another 10% proposal or 25%?
Oh, sorry, good point. I'm sorry. It is a 25%. That was like the work that was left remaining, was getting to a 25% plan. The planning board had voted on Thursday, May 8th, to submit it to the select board, and then at their follow-up meeting on Tuesday of last week, the 13th, they had voted to withdraw it. And then that article is more or less what came in as a citizen's petition. I haven't read through the zoning language. I had been working on writing it for the two articles. So I can't speak to the language necessarily, but my understanding is it tracks to those districts and to the parameters that you can see on the town website. So all of these articles are included on the select board's discussion on the select board's agenda for discussion on Wednesday. Citizens petition, there's really no action for the select board to take. A citizens petition goes on the warrant automatically if it has 100 signatures or the requisite number of signatures. So the select board are required to include that on any warrant they issue for an upcoming meeting. So that will be on there. I'll distribute those materials or any follow-up information that we get from there. So that's kind of the high-level overview of all the articles, and then we can talk through them in a little bit more detail now.
Can I just jump in?
Yes.
You mentioned the select board meeting on Wednesday. Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Select board and planning board are meeting jointly on Wednesday at 7:30. The select board has that meeting plus the warrant articles on their agenda, but it's a joint meeting with the planning board to talk MBTA communities and MBTA community zoning. And we'll see what comes out of the conversation, but that's the plan for Wednesday night. All right, so the first article on the list I think we should go through is acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 57, and to amend the general bylaws to allow denial or revocation of licenses, permits for failure to pay municipal taxes or charges. So if you go to this statute, you'll find what is essentially a lengthy bylaw. We've taken the article, we've created an article out of this, so the article would both accept this provision of Mass General Laws and then insert a new section into the town bylaws that effectively allows the town to deny or revoke licenses and permits for failure to pay taxes or other charges, primarily utility fees. And the language is standard and required. The one thing that really can be tweaked is the duration of failure to pay and when that becomes effective. And so for background, the treasurer had mentioned, this Treasurer Joanna McCarthy, I assume most people maybe have met her, maybe not, but she had approached us suggesting maybe adding this to the kind of tools that we have to encourage payment of taxes. And you can read through the statute to see what the requirements are, but as I said, the bottom line is failure to pay taxes for a 6-month period would mean that we could deny issuing permits. There is a provision in there that would require us to offer payment plans, so not necessarily somebody has to be paid in full immediately, but provide that option, and there's an appeals process as well. But I'll let the treasurer speak to it in further detail if there's anything that I am glossing over.
Yeah, I would just say that I think that this gives us a nice opportunity to ensure that anything owed to the town is collected by the town, or I guess another opportunity to do that. So, like Mr. Milano just said, the period was a little flexible. Our only point of flexibility within the development and of this article, and I thought a 6-month period makes the most sense. I think we can appropriately track a 6-month delinquent list and do so in real time in order to provide those departments that are issuing permits and licenses with with the names and the addresses for delinquency. And so I think that this is going to be good, right? I think that this is a good thing for the town. And you know, it will require some kind of interdepartmental collaboration, which I think is not a problem. It will just be sort of a new process that's set up. And I think that the implications of this are strong. Like, I was mentioning this to some of the staff in my office, and we have instituted a returned payment fee for the town. So if we receive a check, we deposit it, it bounces, we've done all the systems collection of that, we have to reverse that, we then notify you that the check bounced. We do all of that and we say, you know what, that's a $25 fee to the town. We don't have any recourse to collect that right now, so we could even put this on the list, right? I'm just saying that this is yet another opportunity for kind of collection of fees and amounts outstanding to the town. Let's see, the only other thing that I would note here is that the article as written, and I guess the bylaw, does kind of talk about anything that's current, right? Like a current license and a current permit. So that's something we will have to evaluate with those current licenses and permits and just verify that you know, there's no delinquencies that we should be following up on there. But I think that this is a win-win in my book.
The only thing I would just add is, while we're bringing this, and it might sound like we have a massive problem on our hands,
Yeah, right.
we don't.
We don't.
We collect
We do.
upwards of 99% of taxes assessed in a year. There are certainly a handful of very delinquent property owners, and there are tools that the treasurer can use to compel payment. But by and large, we're up to date. This just provides another impetus to encourage payment of those taxes. And it's, you know, the town assesses heavy interest for non-payment. So if folks don't pay, there are already built-in penalties that exist, but this just, if you're coming in for a permit, you're past due, it might compel you to wrap that up, and so you can get your permit released.
And one quick point of clarification, the town does not, well, the town assesses that interest rate. The interest rate is not set by the town, it's set by the state. So the high interest rate that's assessed on unpaid taxes is not something that we have flexibility with. Yeah, and there is, as you know, in the article, a carve out for certain licenses and permits. And, you know, the one that jumps out at me is dog licenses. We have a lot of those here. The clerk's office processes a lot of those. And so I'm happy to see that on this list, because that would just be kind of an administrative nightmare. But I think otherwise this, and marriage license I would put there too, right? So the ones that are listed here make sense to me. The ones that are not listed here also make sense. And those are the places where we'll keep records. So does anybody have any questions on this? Sure.
Well, Brian?
Yeah. Is this mainly individuals or businesses, or is it both?
I think it's both.
You have licenses for clubs and associations dispensing food and or beverage. Is that alcohol licenses you'd withhold?
So to be clear, that's in the exceptions list. So that would not apply to
Oh, I'm
those
sorry.
licenses
Oh,
and
okay.
permits.
And
Yeah.
that list comes directly out of the statute in terms of what is accepted.
What is not accepted?
Right. So we didn't pick and choose any of these. I think like we mentioned, the only thing that we inserted here was
The duration.
the duration, right, of 6 months.
Macy?
I think I'm fine. The only thing I have is, so under section 3, which payment agreements, so if the agreement is breached, and then a hearing is as required by applicable provisions of law, so where does this hearing occur? Does it go to the appellate tax board? Does it go to, like the tax collector? I mean, so I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
so the tax collector is the town tax collector, right? So that's the town of Milton, not the Department of Revenue, that's totally separate. But then the appellate tax board, is that part of the town, or no? That's, because there's a state appellate tax board. So I'm just wondering, just for clarification, which board is it? Are you talking about a board run by the town, or?
So
Or from the state?
it's local, sorry.
Yeah, it would be
local,
local. I'm just missing the language for it. You said in section 3 here?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm going back to number 1. So
Oh,
section
number 1.
1,
Okay, got it.
authority.
Sure.
Second paragraph, it refers to a pending petition before the appellate tax board. So that's a state board. So I'm just wondering, is that, so they would have to get that from the state, from the Commonwealth, right? So they filed that petition for an abatement. But then, in section 3, it says the holder be given notice in a hearing as required by applicable provisions of law. So where is this hearing? I'm just curious. Because I think the statute just is general. So I think for the town, you probably would want to make it specific as to.
No, that's a good point. And the first time when I read through it, I interpreted it as the hearing was before the select board, but
So you probably
maybe
wanna-
that's because we had to insert that in there, and that hasn't happened yet. So that's a good catch. I will double check with town council
Okay.
on that question in terms of the hearing procedures.
And then obviously the abatement of the tax would be with the or the charge would be with the department that made that charge, right? So in the tax instances, it would be the tax assessed by the assessor's office and the board of assessors. And then the water and sewer and trash and stormwater
Yeah.
charges would be through the water, presumably through the Department of Public Works.
So I would probably add that
Yeah.
as opposed, because the appellate tax board, that's a.
Or a pending position. I know
Yeah,
that
so,
reads
yeah, so I
funny.
mean, it
Yep.
could apply, right?
Right.
Because you're right, if they're seeking abatement and they're filing it before the appellate tax board, that would stay, or like, the abatement of any collection, which is fine because that mirrors the language under section 57. But then when I was thinking of going into section 3, perhaps be a bit more specific about where this hearing as required by applicable
So-
provisions of law.
My read of the last sentence of the section 1 is that if a party has a pending petition before the appellate tax board in an unrelated matter, right? So that would come into, if there was a bankruptcy hearing or something
Right,
like
right.
that happening, that does kind of put a stay on
Yes.
some collections. So that's standard and happens currently.
Yep.
But it is a good point that
Yeah, if there's a breach in agreement, right? So said agreement shall be grounds for suspension or revocation of said license permit provided that the holder is giving notice. So you have to provide notice. I don't know what time period you want to give notice or when they need and then a hearing required by.
Yep.
Yeah, so you want to be, I would suggest being specific. Because this is the general language, which, under section 57, which confers upon the town the authority to do this. So I would incorporate the town of Milton's procedures in that section.
So now I've had a moment to refresh my memory. So the reason, because it keeps referring to the licensing authority, which is previously defined as a board or a department that issues licenses. So in that hearing process, the hearing is with the licensing authority rather than with the
There you go.
collector.
Yeah.
So that's who the hearing is in front of, but perhaps a little bit more clarity in terms of that.
Yeah,
right
given
then and
notice
there.
in a hearing before the licensing authority or something, you may want to just change that.
Tom? Tom, can I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely, Julie, I'm sorry.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm understanding, I believe this is what you said. There is currently no method of collecting overdue taxes. Is that correct?
no, incorrect.
Oh, okay, please.
No, yeah, so we do have methods by which we collect delinquent taxes. I think the most significant one is that the town is authorized to put a lien on the deed of the property. We communicate that with the taxpayer. Ultimately, if that balance goes unpaid, I have the authority to foreclose on that property.
Okay, so this is just adding an additional tool in the toolbox and is not a direct way to go after people, but sort of puts up a roadblock should they be coming to the town for other reasons.
Correct, yep. And, you know, with respect to real estate taxes in particular, you know, we operate on a fiscal year. You're not delinquent and we don't demand, that's the official term, right? So we don't demand that final payment until the end of the fiscal year. We're actually, my office is sort of currently working on that now. So in essence, while taxes are due every 3 months on a regular, you know, calendar basis, you pay interest if you don't hit those dates with the amounts that you are owed on those particular dates. You are not demanded to pay that until after the final date, right? So that's happening now for fiscal year '25. This would essentially allow us to, you know, deny, suspend, or revoke a license or permit for anybody who's 6 months or more delinquent.
Okay, and then,
So effectively, it collects faster.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
sorry, Jenna, go
No,
ahead.
no, that's fine. So effectively, it would be an ability to collect them faster, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. And then my last question is, I know you said this isn't really a massive problem. Are you able to quantify, like, what, I don't know how, how big of a problem or small of a problem it is exactly?
So like I said, I think I would, because we have the ability to put liens on properties, if I excluded the properties for which we have a lien on record at the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds for title there, I would put that number, I don't know. I don't have it on the top of my head, but
That's okay. Thank you.
yeah, how about I come back to you on that? I don't want to guesstimate because that would be bad.
Sure,
Could be
that'd be great.
wildly off.
You could just
No
email
worries.
it.
Thank you.
Sure, we can email it too, yeah.
Yeah, I can distribute it.
But I do think what's interesting with this is that there are certain taxes for which there is no recourse. I think a good example of that is personal property. And the only recourse the town has for delinquent and uncollected personal property taxes is to file a case in small claims court, which is just something that is onerous for the town and expensive. And, you know, we don't have a lot of these balances, nor do they get to a magnitude where it would likely be something that we'd want to consider the time and effort of doing. However, should that business apply for a license or permit, this is one easy way of saying, like, let's get that balance trued up.
Andrew, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly, that there's a method in here to expedite the collection of taxes?
Yeah, so no, not really. I guess what I was saying is if you're delinquent a full fiscal year of taxes, and we do not have an ability, other than charging interest, to demand payment and then put a lien on that property until the end of that fiscal year. But let's say the property owner is delinquent for 6 months, their name would get added to this list, and should they find themselves in a position of wanting to take out a license or a building permit or something, they would be not able to do so,
Yep.
and as such probably show up in my office with some way to settle that. Yeah.
But
With a-
other properties, such as personal property, you said, you still don't have a method of placing a lien. All it is a handcuff done.
No, correct. So, you know, the handcuff on the real estate is that you would ultimately have a lien on your property. Personal property, like I said, there's no ability to do that. Again, those
Yep.
balances are not that altogether significant. I would say motor vehicle excise tax, the way to ultimately collect on that, as potentially a lot of us have.
Give out that where it's included.
Okay.
That's to the RMV.
But it doesn't actually, other than inhibiting when they need a new license,
Yeah, right.
there's still no
No,
Okay, I just want to make sure I
it's
understood that.
a tool in the toolbox,
Clearly.
yeah. This isn't going to solution anything.
I guess the real question is, since the licensing board still has the right, may deny, not will deny, why even bother having a 60-day limit or 6-month delinquency period? Why not 0? I mean,
So it's funny you say that, because we, in discussions around this initially, I was like, you know, your unfriendly tax collector here says, why not 0? Get this money in the door. Administratively, that's a little tricky, right? We'd need to maintain a current list that would be available to all the departments on a, call it daily basis, whether someone pays on yesterday, today, tomorrow. I'd rather do that on a 6-month rolling basis. It just feels like that would be more representative of you know, a true delinquent charge that could be capitalized using this, but that would, I think the only thing holding us back is the administrative.
I mean, I'd suggest 0 and 0 day, and whether or not you're able to update it at 6-month intervals, whatever the frequency, less than 6 months, or whatever it is, you'd still have an opportunity to collect earlier than you would otherwise.
Yeah.
And then the other reason to do something like that, or is that, I mean, it still gives you discretion. The other thing you might look at is rather than focus on necessarily 6 months, but large dollars. So if somebody has a huge outstanding tax on property or anything, that is the threshold at which, because you don't want to strangle somebody just because they have forgot to pay a excise tax on their car that's $60 from last year.
Yeah, the registry of motor vehicles will ultimately strangle you on that.
No, but
Yeah.
but the point is, I mean, this is really not.
No, I understand what you're saying,
The
yeah.
intent is not to necessarily ensnare small dollar amount fugitives, but really to ensure that the real dollars, material dollars that the town needs to collect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the way that I operate generally, right? That with a focus being on making sure our administrative costs is borne by those that are going to collect the town the most money it is owed, right? That said, I do think that there are instances where we have, I mean, I mentioned the $25 returned payment fee, right? I mentioned the personal property tax. We have boat excise tax. It's like these things, in order to administratively chase those down, it would take time and effort and cost, right? So this would be a bit of a quick win in those areas as well. But I do understand what you're saying. I mean, I hope that this is not the case, that those properties with significant arrears don't have an open building permit that I'm not aware of. I think we're pretty good on some of those of certain magnitude, right? But I think you're right. If we focus on that, and even if the list is sorted by that would be.
Because by artificially introducing a 6-month window, it's the same thing as a property tax not being in arrears until the next fiscal year.
Yeah.
And so you're creating these fake windows in time in which, like, somebody may get their building permit or whatever, and really what you want to do is chase down the people at large dollar amounts where it's worth your time to do that. And I think the way to do that is keep the discretion that you have, give the licensing board discretion, and also figure out a window or a dollar amount that it's worth your effort and time to chase administratively. I mean, in spirit, I really like this.
Yeah.
I think having a 6 or 0 month period, a 0 month, like 0 period, gives you the same flexibility. If you want to report on it 6 months at a time, fine. But if you can do it better or more frequently, or also focus on large dollar amounts. I think you get the best of both worlds.
The other thing is, can I?
Sure.
Is to go quarterly, because since taxes, at least real estate taxes are billed quarterly, you can do it a 3-month period, so it doesn't, and then, I'm just thinking, what else does quarterly? Water, right, sewer, I think stormwater is what, is it
Every year.
Every year. So you can follow your bills. If somebody comes in, didn't make their tax payments or their water and sewer, they're applying for a building permit, you can deny them just on that 3 months. So it makes the shorter period.
Right.
So that's, I mean, I'm just saying that it just follows the billing of what we
Yeah,
have
I
to
think
pay.
it's a little nuanced because this is something I was not aware until I got in this seat. But while we bill in 3-month cycles for water and sewer, there are 3 different sections in town for which we bill, right? So our billing for water and sewer is happening every month. It's just, Group A gets it every 3 months, then Group B gets it the next 3 months. So it's not always on the same calendar rotation, but I understand what you're saying. And I'm happy with to be able to do something that wouldn't constrict us to do something administratively on a more frequent basis.
Day-to-day would be difficult to maintain.
Sure, but yet I'm happy to respond to any inquiry from any licensing authority at any time on that day, right? Should it be something of concern?
We just have one question from Judy online. Judy?
Thank you. So, Joanna, do you know, like, the breakdown might be between business and residential arrears?
No, short answer. Longer answer is, I think each of, for real estate tax, I'm assuming that would be a real estate and commercial delineation. For personal property tax, that's mainly business. Motor vehicle excise tax could be either, in which form the tax is assessed or by who's the car owner. So I don't know that off the top of my head. I could put together that information though if you're looking for it.
Just trying to sort out whether of course, there's more residential in our town than there is business. It's pretty well been observed that way. So would you think that on a special permit portion, that those come more from a business than a residential? Properties?
So I would say there's a bunch of different categories there, right? So we have building permits, those could either be homes or businesses. We have special licenses. I'm not gonna be able to answer that for you, but I'm guessing we could figure
Because
that out.
I thought it was mentioned about special permits, not just permits of other sorts.
No, that would be a land use question under 40A. That would not, to my knowledge, follow under this necessarily, that you can't seek a special permit without being up to date on your taxes. This
Okay,
is
well,
referring to building permits and other licenses and permits along those lines rather than the land use piece of it.
Like what comes to mind handily is the new restaurant at the Fruit Center. They were seeking special permits. Now, I understand they're going to be a lessee in a commercial property, so that would be up to the owners of the Fruit Center. How would that play out? So
You'll have
if the
to follow
Fruit
up with
Center
that.
was delinquent in their real estate taxes to the town of Milton, and then one of their lessees needed a special permit to process their business, would the town then deny that permit to the lessee based on the lessor not paying their taxes. I know that sounds,
No, I get you.
Okay.
I don't believe the intention, and I will confirm with town council, I don't believe special permits and other land use regulatory matters are subject to this, as this refers specifically to licenses and licensing authorities, but we will confirm that and get back to you.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much for helping us out with that. Want to move on to the next?
Sure, why don't we
Thank you.
jump to the elderly and stable taxation fund? So this is accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 63D. So what this would allow is for the town to collect donations for elderly and disabled taxation aid fund, primarily through a checkoff on property tax bills and other bills, but other locations as well. And the money would be under the control of a new committee set up under the statute, which is called an Elderly and Disabled Taxation Fund, an Elderly and Disabled Taxation Aid Committee, which has a 5-member group, the chair of the Board of Assessors, the tax collector / treasurer, and 3 residents. That committee would be charged with identifying the rules and guidelines for which those donations would then be used to support people determined to be eligible for assistance. So donations to the town held under the control of a taxation aid committee, which would then distribute and dispense funding to support those who qualify according to the rules set up by that committee. This has been something that's been put into place in a number of other cities and towns for differing amounts of years. A couple that come to mind are Needham, Hingham, Dedham, and in poking around, Needham is bringing in between $15,000 and $20,000 a year. Hingham looks to be closer to like $45,000 a year. Bedford just did it a couple of years ago, and they're like $3,000 to $5,000 a year. So different communities are having different levels of experience with it, and the intention is to provide an opportunity for folks to donate if they would like to, and for those donations to then be used to support those who apply and qualify for it. Again, something that the treasurer had mentioned as something that we should look at. So we're looking to bring this to town meeting to put it into place.
I think that just to add some context to my initial conversations about this, this came across my desk as I was noticing an opportunity in our motor vehicle excise tax bill preparation cycle and reading through the Department of Revenue guidelines on what the exact things are that need to be on a motor vehicle excise tax bill. Do we have all of that information, et cetera? I was like, what's this local funds checkoff? And there were 2 items on there that referred to both Chapter 60, Section 3C and Chapter 60, Section 3D. Chapter 60, Section 3C, I presume, has already come before this committee because it has been passed already by town meeting prior to my starting in this office, and that is allowing the town to voluntarily donate on their motor vehicle excise tax bills to scholarship and education funds. And we currently use that. I don't know if this is ringing a bell for everybody, but in your motor vehicle excise tax bill, there's for the first commitment, and so I'll back up a little bit. The first commitment is if you own a car on January 1st, you get a motor vehicle tax bill in that first commitment. If you buy a car February 2nd, you might get it in the second commitment. We have about 7 or 8 commitments in tax bill cycles for motor vehicles a year. But we generally just do this in the first one because we we do take an opportunity to include a little third of a paper slip about MPACE. Milton, I'm gonna get this wrong. It's well, that's bad. But it's in performing arts, community, culture, right.
Yeah.
But it's we're gonna get there. We get there.
Yeah.
It's a fund that's managed by the by members of Milton Public Schools to send students on pretty great field trips and tickets. I think it's like 4th grade Shakespeare performances have been funded by MPACE over the last 10 years or so. So there is an amount that's typically collected generally from the proceeds of those donations that we earmark specifically for that fund. This would be something similar. And we just referenced, the ability to do this under Mass General laws is specifically for low-income elderly or disabled persons. So the establishment of the committee would have to put some, would obviously generate the parameters around that. And I imagine this is not the biggest amount of, money collected, but at the same time, I keep bringing this to the town administrator's attention because particularly I would say in the run-up to the override vote for the town, I personally and professionally received some interest from folks around town who were interested in helping out the certain members of the community who might find the increase in taxes unsustainable, and I think that we should be taking advantage of every opportunity we have to give people the ability to contribute in such a way that offsets their neighbor's tax burden if they can't afford it. So I think that this is again something that would bring in who knows how much, but I imagine this would be something that would float to zero at the end of the year, right? We distribute it all, and then we do it again.
Anyone have any?
Just a quick question. So the donation would not be a charitable donation, it would be a donation to the town that would then distribute it.
For a tax deduction, you mean, in terms of the
Yeah.
donating? It is a question I have seen that was raised in other communities. I didn't find the answer. I would lean towards likely not in that case.
Yeah, if there's no code.
I think we'd want to be
there's no
really
deduction.
specific about it.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be
No,
an
it's-
instance that should this move forward and receive town meeting approval, I'd want to, publicize this to the mountaintops, right? And
Absolutely.
as a way to kind of gather the most donations that we could, but be really specific about things like that. So that if you're writing a check to the town of Milton, although presumably that could be a deductible amount for your own personal taxes, I don't know. Like
Judy has her hand up.
We can't make that presumption for anybody, so, yeah.
Macy and then Judy online.
Just a quick question. So once this committee is established and appointed by the select board, do the intended community that would benefit from this fund, would they apply for aid? Is there a whole screening application process that the committee would establish?
So the benefit of have other communities having done this, we can steal and copy, whether it's the guidelines or the application forms. But yes, we would envision, once the guidelines are evaluated and put into place, an application to go along with it. That would set out those parameters pretty clearly. And we've done, through the senior means tested property tax exemption, there's been other ways where we've tried to find ways that are less burdensome administratively to find qualifying folks, so that it's not yet another form and yet another application and yet new information to fill, but I think that would be the work of the committee to kind of map that out.
Okay.
And then, as Joanna mentioned, share that news widely and hopefully generate both interest from donors and those who are in need.
And would that announcement of this established fund and committee, will this be communicated in various forms and in different languages? Because I'm just thinking of the community in which we live. If you're just broadcasting the availability of this fund in English, you're neglecting a big part of the community. And especially if your other intended communities are disabled, will be available in Braille or any other types of disability where residents who are qualified as disabled would be able to understand that there's this fund available to them.
Yeah.
So I guess the committee is tasked. So I hope that this future committee will take all this in consideration and not just consider the English-speaking population of Milton. Because the elderly, there's different languages here, which is what makes us town so great. And also the various disabilities that our residents have.
Yes. You're talking to a potential member of that committee, or a member of that committee, and I feel very strongly in alignment with your thinking on that. So my hope would be that we get as much money as possible into a fund.
Of course.
Judy, then Andrew.
Thank you. So my question goes to this. What department in town will administer this process, such as the assessor's office, for like the senior circuit breaker that's gonna be online for next, not 26 tax year, but 27 tax year, the COA for the work-off program. What department do you foresee, or what department are other towns using for the administration of this?
My thought there would be the administration is the committee, or I guess the decision-making is happening at the committee. The administration of it would be implementing the committee's decision by way of abatement to real estate tax bills, and my office doing the actual billing and collecting of those bills. So I would imagine the departments, and it makes sense that the chair of the board of assessors and the town treasurer sit on this committee, because I do think that it impacts our two departments, because that would be how you'd effectuate the relief, the taxation aid itself.
Nick, do you know offhand what other towns are doing in that regard? I ask this question because I think if we are giving an abatement or let's just say a hand up to help pay taxes, that it should be administered by actual town employee departments rather than appointed committees. That's just my personal, or how I view it, which could be seen as personal, as I was saying, but I would feel more comfortable allotting money for taxation relief via one of our town employee departments. Do you know, Nick, how it's done elsewhere?
I've seen a mix in terms of whether that support staff is in the treasurer collector office or in the assessor's office or even the town manager, town administrator's office. So to Joanna's point, the committee under the law is required to set the guidelines as to who's eligible. And they would also be required to figure out if they have $20,000, how that aid would be dispersed, whether it's equally or in different tranches. So there are decision points for the committee under the law that there has to be in terms of a paperwork, receiving applications and making sure applications are complete. Again, that is a place where staff support will be necessary. And between the treasurer's office and the assessor's office, will ensure that there's employees who are responsible for that, to your point.
and to further where I'm at is that an applicant will be submitting rather sensitive personal data
Correct.
to enjoy this gift to their tax relief. And now we come down to, if I turn in something at the town hall to Joanna's office or the assessor's office or whoever else, I feel as though that my data is now protected. To a committee, I don't feel that the data will have that same sense of security. Do I make sense?
I understand what you're saying. I think the committee would be tasked less with looking at individual applications and tasked more with setting the overall parameters by which the program and eligibility would be then determined.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Andrew, then Macy.
Yeah, I had some questions and comments. One, I have a really hard time finding much of any information about MPACE. I know it's a Milton Partnership for Arts and Cultural Enrichment.
Partnership.
It's not listed under any of the boards or committees. I can't find it as a registered 501c3, so I doubt anything to it would be tax deductible, even if you were able to do that on a pass-through basis. Who's on that committee now? I mean, the last thing I found was from 2011, and
Did you just look at the school website? Because I do think it's run and managed at the schools.
at the school, okay, because I was looking at the town website.
No, it's a committee
Okay.
that's overseen by the school district.
I think parents are involved in it too.
Yes,
'cause I remember
parents
asking,
and
yeah.
staff,
Parents
yes.
are involved.
I can get you that information though.
No, it's
I'm
more,
copied on their messages often.
no, it's more so that if you are asking taxpayers to
Yeah.
potentially donate to it, and one, if there's an opportunity to make it tax deductible, make a write-off, then it's great. And two, if it is a 501c3 and eligible for tax write-offs, and you are not, if the town is a pass-through agent for that, then it's sort of complicating, but if you can collect it, great. But more, if information should be easily found somewhere through a web search, because I'm digging fairly hard and can't find anything through a Google search.
So, if I can, I understand what you're saying, and I think point well taken. I do believe that the information that we have regarding MPACE and making donations to that as a, and I'm using air quotes because it's in the statute like this, an education fund, is all that information sits on our Unipay site on a.
Yep, I see. Oh.
Yeah, so you might be able to find it there if you follow the links in order to pay your real estate tax bill. You'll be able to also make an MPACE donation at any time. So you click on that, you'll find some information there, but it's bare bones for sure. Like I said, that there is a buck slip, insert in the mailer for that first commitment of 18 or 19,000 vehicles that we sent out bills for, and I think I would say the last 2 years, roughly, we collected about $10,000 each fiscal year.
And it's great, and I think it's noble, but
Yep.
you should also.
And, I think that this specifically was brought to town meeting. And again, specifically, we would be going for a conversation around a taxation aid fund. And I think the only other ability we have to add a check, and they're called in the statutes checkoff box, is for scholarship funds. That would be the only other, they're called voluntary checkoffs.
Yeah, I'm looking at the school site, and it's not
It's not on the school site either.
not
They have a
easy.
Facebook page.
And I know that also, but
I know that.
you know,
it's apparent.
so in principle, the biggest thing I have a problem with is sending money into a black box. And like, I honestly believe this is a great program, and but if I were to donate to it personally, I'd want to know who's administering it. Are there any real fiscal controls behind it? And if it's tax deductible, it would drive my decision on how much more I would give if it were not. And so if this is something as a town, from a tax department standpoint, is like publicly advocating and giving advantageous preference from a donation standpoint, I think there should be a lot more transparency behind it. And not to say that it's not transparent, but there's just no footprint whatsoever.
There would be a lot more if it's a 501c3.
Mhm.
That would, yeah, but that's
But
that's
there,
not really the point.
yeah, it's not, and so whether it's a school site or the town website, should have it on there, and the Unipay be much more descriptive about what it is and what controls it has.
Maisie, you have a question?
I just have one last thing. I think there's a typo or missing words. It says the last line, to be appointed by the select board instead of appointed select board. So you just want to insert by the, I'm assuming, right?
Good catch. Had a couple of typos in the annual town meeting warrant that have gone unremarked upon, so
You can never edit or
I know,
view your own
seriously.
work. I never catch my own typos. I always have
we
something else.
send it around.
Ruined my day, Nick.
Not in your, my stuff.
No,
Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That was me,
No.
not you.
I'm the same way, Maisie.
Oh, I can't read. I'm like, it's perfect, go.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at it anymore.
Brian, you have a question as to this article?
Yeah, question, comment. The way I read the law is you can't spend it on anything other than like real estate taxes, like you can't do other things. But you can invest it if you want, you don't have to spend it all. But when you appropriate it, and you make a decision on how you're gonna spend it, does it come back before the Warrant Committee or the Select Board?
No, in this case, no, it would be a reduction, and I believe, how I saw a few communities have set it up is on the fourth quarter tax bill, it would reduce their owed amount on the fourth quarter bill. So it wouldn't be an expenditure, it wouldn't be a payment to an individual. It would be a reduction on what they owe in that fourth quarter bill. And it wouldn't necessarily, the committee would be the committee that's under the
And
law.
they make the final decision.
I guess I would just add that I have always envisioned it as, and I hadn't thought any differently, that this committee would establish the guidelines and parameters by which the amounts collected would be allocated, but not peruse individual applicants' information, right? Leave that to perhaps the assessor's department or my department to do so. And you know, I would say that, again, other members of the committee are not sitting right here, but I would also suggest that the application be the least amount of burden for our residents to make application to be a part of this pool, and that it would be wonderful to distribute these amounts as broadly as we could. So I think with you know, I think the committee could and should have meetings to determine that and talk about that as a policy and set that and advertise that, right? So that, you know, if the committee decides that every applicant would share in every applicant that is eligible would receive at least $1 of tax relief, right, then every applicant should expect to receive at least that $1, right? I don't know, like I'm making that up, but,
Hopefully it'll be more.
yes, exactly, exactly. And just, I think procedurally, for our practices, because we bill semi-annually and we have 2-quarter remittances on that bill, we would probably do it such that it would be a reduction, an equivalent reduction, both in the 3rd quarter tax bill and in the 4th quarter tax bill. We do that with most exemptions and otherwise.
It's like, I'm trying to think what the other thing was, like the state, the other thing, program we had, what?
The senior beans.
Right. It's tough to communicate it to people. A lot of people don't know it's not out there. They don't take advantage of it, and they should. That was a problem.
Yeah.
That.
For sure.
I would say, I mean, I know next on the list is talking about the exemptions that the town offers too. I think that as a whole, the philosophy behind some of this stuff, from my vantage point, was to be really loud about this to the community in every way we possibly could be, so that the options for our taxpayers are out there, and we are able to provide the resources about how to make application to use them and take advantage of them. I
agree.
I can't do that alone, but we need to do that. We need to figure out a way in order to do that as a town and as a community.
Yeah.
I think.
It's a great program. Great.
Okay, any other questions? Let's move on to the exemption,
Sure.
if you're ready.
So the article I sent out is to accept 3 provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Clause 5, or Section 5. There are 3 exemptions included for adoption here. So Clause 17E, Clause 22I, and Clause 41D. These are all related to exemptions that are offered in Milton and across all cities and towns. They're statutory property tax exemptions that cities and towns are required to offer. The ones covered by Clause 17 are for the elderly or survivors, minor.
Right here, surviving spouses and minors.
So there's additional information online about who qualifies for that. It's a $175 exemption. Typically, if you're a senior, you'll qualify under 41, which is a separate exemption, but this is available, and it in Milton has only been offered in a few $100s in the past few years, so 3 to 4 folks have qualified for it. Sorry, just to take a step back. So what broadly the article would do is we would accept these 3 provisions to allow each of these exemptions I'm about to describe to increase annually in accordance with the Consumer Price Index as determined by the Department of Revenue. So these exemptions have been set at a flat amount in the law. And now the legislature doesn't go in and change these regularly. These under Clause 17 have been $175 for as far as back as I can find. Clause 22 are for veterans, so there's several different exemptions under that. Again, those are flat rates that have been set for some time. And the third one is for the elderly, and that's a $500 exemption, which again has been set for some time. So what this article would do would allow each of these to be increased annually in accordance with the Consumer Price Index that's determined by the Department of Revenue. And over the past 6 years, CPI has gone up about 3.9%, which is not too far off from our single-family tax bill, which goes up about 3.5% a year. The obvious difference there being is we did just have an override, so that 3.5% is going to be higher now. So they do correlate pretty well together. Trying to solve the problem of that these exemptions are set at a flat number and don't adjust. 2.5 goes up every year. We all know tax bills are increasing, but the exemptions have stayed the same. I'll return to the veterans benefits, veterans in a moment. There are income requirements as well to qualify for these. Under Clause 41, which is a $500 exemption, it's for those age 70 or older who qualify for income purposes. That's a $500 exemption, and it's about $10,000 a year that have been exempted in Milton. I'm just trying to pull up the data here.
And just to add to that, I think it's also an income and an asset qualification for both the elderly.
The veterans benefits is one where there have been more. It's close to the range between $60,000 to $70,000 per year, depending on the exemption. But again, these would all be allowed to increase annually per the CPI, and that is announced regularly on a regular basis by the Department of Revenue what that annual adjustment will be. And I didn't before the meeting tonight, but I will distribute some backup packets about the various exemptions. If you qualify for one of these exemptions, that's the exemption you get. So under MGL Chapter 59, you would get the one that is the highest. You can't package these exemptions together. Maybe that's the big picture overview. If there's any specific questions, I can work to address them.
Does that mean when you can't package them, is that just related to this article, or what about the CPDs? If you get that, you can't get any of these?
They would interplay with each other because some of those are based on what your tax liability is. So you get a $1,000 exemption because you have a 100% service-connected disability. Now your tax liability will go down by $1,000. That might pull you out of eligibility for a different program. So they do interact with each other, essentially.
Ron?
Is that per property? Because if you have two owners and one qualifies for one and someone qualifies for another one.
Good question. I know I read that. I made a note of it.
I don't have the answer.
I believe it's
Doesn't
a
it,
tax bill basis for the property.
Yeah, makes sense.
doesn't it have to be your primary domicile?
Oh, yeah. So you, in the event of holding two homes, yes, primary, but also the exemptions are for the property tax bill, and so there's one per household. And the other thing I'll note is that for these exemptions, the state does reimburse us for these. So the veterans ones are reimbursed not quite at 100%. Depending on the exemption, they're reimbursed at different percentages. The senior one, which is clause 41, that's reimbursed at 100%. And clause 17, anybody eligible for those, we are reimbursed at 100%. That said, if we accept these provisions to allow it to adjust, our reimbursement will stay at the state exemption amount. So say in 3 years, the clause 41 elderly exemption is $600. For every individual that has that, the town will only get $500 from the state. So we'll still get the reimbursement, but only for the base amount going forward.
Nope.
Any other questions about 59, Section 5?
Just a quick question.
Oh, sure.
Cumulatively, this year, what does this look like?
It's about, all of the exemptions are, it's a little hard to put a number on. So the reason is because clause 41A allows you to defer your taxes. So if you qualify on income and you're up to date, you're allowed to just not pay your taxes at a 4% interest. So that's usually the biggest amount. It's generally around $120,000 to $140,000 in exemptions per year. Once you carve out that larger pool of the deferrals.
So about roughly 140,000, of which close to 100% is today reimbursed, or with the exception of the second provision, clause 21, right?
1780.
Or
so they're all reimbursed. The veterans
but at different
ones
rates.
are not at 100%.
Okay, not at 100%.
All the clause 22 ones.
But that, I'm just trying to get a rough sense of what that deficit going forward
Sure.
on an annual basis looks like. Okay.
For
Thanks.
example, last year we paid out about $67,000 in veterans tax exemptions, and of that, $47,000 was reimbursed. So that deficit will grow going forward
Okay.
if this is approved.
Okay.
Anything else? It's 9:05. Okay. We all set?
Those are the articles I had. Obviously, I'll distribute some additional materials as backup on these. I'll follow up with, I did send the MBTA community stuff out. The rest of the information on that is on the town website. I think you've already coordinated with the planning board potentially. And if I do get a contact person for the citizens petition, I will let you know.
Yes, that would be great if someone would be willing to come down.
Sure. And you're planning for that for next, or 2 weeks?
Planning board, first week of June,
Okay, all right,
is what they said.
okay.
Julia?
This is Jay.
Jay?
Oh, whoops. Sounds
Jay,
like
go
Julia
ahead.
with Bert. Okay, I want to circle back to the first thing on the agenda, the reserve fund. Mr. Milano, I know that you love it when you have last minute second guessing of your financial decisions. So here you go. So thinking about this $300,000 for the reserve fund, going back in time a couple months, there was $1 million in free cash that was going to be going to the special education stabilization account. And then with the school issues this year, the decision was made to put, instead of that $1 million into this, sorry, I should say, if you override path, which it did, so $1 million is going to go to the special ed stabilization account. Then it was decided a month or two ago that instead of that $1 million going there, $700,000 would go to the reserve fund with the intent of that will stabilize the schools for this year, which left $300,000 left over, and that's the $300,000 we're talking about. Given all that, it's probably too late to do anything about it, but was there any thought given to taking some percentage of that $300,000 and seeding the newly created special ed stabilization account with some money? Thank you.
So, no, I don't think so at this time. I think our preference at this point is to, I introduced the meeting with, and I don't know if you were there for that, so $300,000 recommended going to the reserve fund. I still believe that's the best place for it to close out this year, and it starts us off next year if it's not used with a good head start on free cash. The school committee could, if it doesn't need as much money as it expects, it could itself put funding into that special education reserve fund, and they're able to do that moving forward now. That's an option for them. And then, as I explained at the beginning of the meeting, I need to talk to the select board about this on Wednesday night because depending on what happens at town meeting, I sense there is significant interest in continuing to work on MBTA communities further, which will require additional financial resources. So I intend to inquire with the board about potentially taking some of that money and setting it aside for additional planning work around MBTA communities, depending on the direction the board, the select board and planning board want to go. We're having a joint meeting on Wednesday. So that may even be subject to change. So where I stand today is, mostly expecting most of that to go to the reserve fund, and maybe some to some additional dedicated planning monies around MBTA communities.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for your question, Jay. Julia?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm still catching up on the select board meeting from last week, so forgive me if this was covered there, but I thought I heard them talk about potentially not having this June special town meeting at all, but it sounds like if this citizen's petition has been put forward, does that mean the special town meeting will definitely happen?
No, good observation and good question. Yes, that was discussed as a potential option. particularly focused on, a pathway forward on MBTA communities. So I would say more to come on that Wednesday, whether they pick that conversation up in terms of whether to have the town meeting at all. The citizen petition under the law is now required to be inserted in the warrant for the next special town meeting. And if the select board does not have one on June 16th, then whatever special town meeting comes next, that article remains required to be inserted in that warrant. So it's not a requirement to have the town meeting, it's a requirement that the next town meeting have that article on the warrant.
I see. And then in terms of public hearings that are required for different kinds of articles from different places, am I correct in understanding that a citizen's petition does not require a public hearing?
No, any proposed change to zoning under Chapter 40A requires a public hearing, and the provisions in the process for adopting zoning changes is laid out in Chapter 40A, Section 5, and it requires that all zoning articles have a public hearing. There's a time limit by which the planning board must have the public hearing, and then the planning board must have the public hearing before the town meeting and issue a report to town meeting. The public hearing could theoretically happen the same day as town meeting, but it has to happen prior to the town meeting taking action on the article.
And does the planning board have a choice in whether or not they hold this public hearing?
Yes, I think Chapter 48 says 60 days or 65 days.
So if the public hearing on the citizen's petition is not held before June 16th, which is possible because they have 60 days to have it, what happens procedurally at town meeting with this citizen's petition?
That's a good town council question. Yes, so said public hearing shall be held within 65 days after the proposed zoning ordinance or bylaw is submitted to the planning board. So the only requirement I see is that the public hearing has to happen within 65 days. It won't truly be submitted to them until the signatures are certified, either tomorrow or Wednesday, which would start that calendar calculation. I'd have to ask that question of town council. I assume.
Okay.
I would have to confer with town council and circle back with you.
Okay, and then you said a report needs to be produced by the planning board after the public hearing?
It can be verbal. It could be the planning board reporting to town meeting its position on an article. It does not have to be a written report, but they have to report to the town meeting on the article.
And if the public hearing was held, say, tomorrow, when are they required to issue the report?
There's not a timeline necessarily. They just have to have had their public hearing and then be available and able to report to the town meeting.
So they could just be asked at town meeting to verbally give their report?
Correct.
Could they refuse to do that?
Again, a town council question. I don't believe so.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about anything we've discussed here or any other articles?
I'm sorry.
Because
of Julia's questions, I just do want to point out that town council has a memo on the MBTA Communities webpage that outlines, because under 48.5 there is a 2-year bar on a zoning article returning to town meeting for action. If it is not different from what went before, unless it has the planning board's approval. So if the planning board does not support the citizen's petition, its subject matter is MBTA Communities. We did have a warrant article that was not approved by the town in 2023, early 24. So that 2-year bar is in place. However, the question is what this citizen petition has different from 2023? How different does it need to be or not for that to happen? And Town Council's memo lays out the case law around this and just in more detail. So it's been something that I know has been raised. So I wanted to flag it. There is not clarity from the courts on what different means. So it might be one of those vagaries that we need to deal with, but I just wanted to put it out there in addition to the other Section 5 requirements that Julia just asked about. There is also that one, which is how does that 2-year bar interplay with the citizens petition? There is an element under MBTA communities with half of the units capacity needing to be in the transit area that they'll all look similar to an extent. So the question of similar versus different, I'll leave to others to make that ruling, but I just wanted to bring it up as another requirement under Section 5 that you may hear more about in the coming weeks.
And sorry, Nick, who determines whether or not it is different enough? Is that the planning board?
Again, I would have to defer to Town Council on that, and it's on his radar to do some homework on, assuming, that the signatures are certified, A, and B, that the town meeting goes forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Brian?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
I want to go back to the 300,000.
Yes.
So they want to put this into free cash.
It's in free cash today.
And
Sitting in
sure.
unused free cash, right?
Unused, so that they can draw on it before the end of the year. Is
Who's
that
they?
The select board or?
So,
This question.
yeah, just to trace back in time, as the school committee was working through fiscal 25 challenges, they had come to the select board requesting that $1 million in free cash that we had earmarked for the new special education reserve fund be instead appropriated to the reserve fund for potential use by the school department in fiscal 25. We had a joint meeting with the school committee and the select board. Maybe I'm getting my timelines warped, but yes. They came and made that request, representatives from the school committee. Select board agreed on a $700,000 appropriation, which is the one that went in the May town meeting. So now the question is what to do with that last $300,000, and what the select board had agreed at the time was, let's buy some time, see where things stand in a month, 2 months, and then make a decision about it. Based on their projections and a supplemental budget that has been working its way through the legislature, the schools feel comfortable with the $700,000 that have been set aside, that they should be able to work within that amount. So they're not necessarily requesting it, but we felt, let's just put it in the reserve fund so it's there, it's available in a worst case scenario. Because again, if it's not used, it just closes up the free cash just as a void if it wasn't touched. So that's kind of the timeline and thinking there. So there's not an earmarked need for it right now, today.
But it's really technically, I'm sorry if I don't understand something, there's only 2 months left in the fiscal year.
Correct.
Right? So they'd have to need it, that 300,000 within the next 2 months.
Correct.
We just approved their budget for the rest of the year.
We've approved their budget for fiscal 26 starting in
26,
July. Based on their forecasts, they won't need it. The issue would be that assumes some money will flow from the state into the special education circuit breaker. And if that amount is less than anticipated, they will have less revenue with which to support their budget. So their costs, they feel pretty confident about. It's more about what revenues are we gonna have to balance their school budget in this fiscal year. And that was the request for the $100,000, or the $1 million.
So revenue is the question, not the expenses.
Correct. And I'll just note on the town side, we're under pressure ourselves because this was a much icier and snowier winter than we've had in the past couple of years. Not conveniently for, that's where I was going.
Sorry.
Inconveniently for us, it was a lot of weekend storms, which Saturday, Sunday turns into a lot of double time, and very expensive. So we're working through the town budget as well because of the pressures of the snow and ice here. And as I've been talking about since really December on health insurance has been a really tough year. And so Having the reserve fund is helpful for times like this when the snow and ice causes a deficit in our budget that's much higher than it usually is. The other thing I'll just throw out there on snow and ice is that we don't have to close out that deficit in this fiscal year. We're allowed to let that remain in deficit and then adjust it between now and December, essentially. So we have multiple options to resolve that issue. We'd like to wrap it up within this fiscal year and close the books accordingly, but we don't have to if we can't.
Thank you.
Tom?
Judy?
Just a quick question for Nick before.
Thank you.
They are ready to leave us. Nick, I'm going over my notes and I don't think I did a good job taking notes. So to clarify, on those tax deferments, say the veterans, we defer for $1,000, we get 600 back from the state, leaving a deficit of 400 on that particular property. I didn't seem to clarify for my own self what happens to that deficit.
Yeah, sorry, deficit's not the right word. The town funds that portion. So the assessors have what's called an overlay account where funding goes every year to support exemptions in the senior work-off program. So exemptions are paid out of that, and then we are reimbursed by the state. So exemptions come out of the overlay, and if it's reimbursed at 100%, that 100% comes back to the town as a general fund revenue. If it's less than 100%, it just means we get less reimbursed. The money, there's no impact to the taxpayer. It's just we put up $1,000, we don't necessarily get $1,000 back for the veterans exemptions.
And just to be clear, Judy, I think you used the word deferral, and to be super specific about this, these are exemptions. There is a tax deferral program that is...
The 4% interest and a lien on your house.
Yes.
Yeah. And Nick, you mentioned the work-off program. My understanding of the work-off program is that you're not working, you're getting paid by the town to work so many hours per tax year, and that money goes directly to the treasurer's office, not to the worker, if we could say that. And that is applied to the tax bill. So how would you be looking for money back from the state on that? Could you explain that?
We aren't. We don't get anything back from the state on the tax work-off. We get money back from the state for exemptions.
Okay, so I thought I heard you say the work-off program was included. Sorry.
If I did, I misspoke, but maybe I was referring to where that money comes out of, which is the assessor's overlay account, which is the case for both the tax work-off and all the exemptions.
Okay, so the paycheck per se, we'll just call it that, comes out of the overlay account.
Yeah.
You pay the taxes. Perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
We all set, committee? Okay. So, Nick, can I just ask you a question just as to the first, just about the appellate, the language Macy brought up, just about the appellate tax board. When would we see changes this week or maybe next week?
Yes, sorry. All the articles are with town council, so I'll flag that question in particular. We talked through it, so I feel like I'm just not answering it well. So we will circle back with you on that if any changes we feel are necessary or needed for clarity on that.
And also, I'm sorry, to the chapter 60 and chapter 59, they're with town council now too?
Correct.
So he hasn't approved this language per se yet?
No, but typically any modifications he'll make will be in terms of legal proofreading rather than substance.
Okay. Okay, so that's really all I have. Everybody good?
Thank you for your time.
I'll be in touch. Treasurer McCarthy, thank you so much for coming down and visiting the Warrant Committee. We appreciate it.
And we talked about the warrant print date.
We did.
So,
Tomorrow. No.
and I guess
Bad joke, bad joke, bad joke.
I was just gonna say, so I expect that, and I understand it, and I apologize for the committee being in the position accordingly. But yeah, end of this week, and then I would expect a lot of green sheet recommendations and comments.
And Nick, what I shared with the same, obviously we were good on the annual, just because the timing was great, and thank you. But we'll do our best as we vote to submit them. So I just want to say this publicly, so we can at least get them on the website.
Right.
And I know the importance that a lot of people give to the comments, so we'll be diligently working on them as we vote.
Great. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank you.
very
Thank you both.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Warrant Committee. We have 3 statutory things we just talked about. MBTA 10 and 25, liquor on town property, which doesn't look like it's probably going to happen. The overlay, which we've discussed and yet to vote on, and there's our amended language. So we just need to really, I think we were all in agreement, those who were in attendance, to a yes vote. Citizens petitions, petition, no idea. Light trespass. Okay, so, we're looking at, 7 at least? I'll do the floodplain comment. It's rather easy. Aside from overlay, how do we feel about voting on anything? When I'm saying that, I'm thinking Wednesday. Select Board hasn't moved on light trespass. I assume it's going to be the same language that we saw. We could discuss that. I'm just trying to forecast our Wednesday right now, because even in light of what Julia had indicated, and I've heard that also, about maybe not having this town meeting, we need to just be prepared for all the reasons Nick just said. So, anybody want to give me any ideas? I'm open to any suggestions.
Well, I think there's some things we can vote on that, but Nick had to make some changes.
Yeah.
To a few things, so those are out there. But I think I should have said this at the beginning, but I think the light trespass, we should try to see if we can get a volunteer from the select board, and maybe meet with 1 or 2 people from the warrant committee, and just tidy it up, and just try to tighten it up, so that we don't have this confusion. And put forth something that people aren't sure about. That's what I would recommend.
Well, they're voting on that's up on their agenda on Wednesday.
But if they miss things again, we're gonna have the same problem.
Yeah,
I don't know. Do they know what's wrong?
Can you hold on a second? Thanks, Brian. Well, it's an open meeting.
Can I not do that?
Well, I
Well,
don't.
we're recording. We'll be
It's an open
recording,
meeting.
so.
Yeah. I'm just in terms of that, Brian. I really think it's going to be the same language that they're going to consider
Right.
at this. I can have a conversation with Nick about it, but I don't really. It changed all those times. I would be surprised maybe if there's additional language or things that were added, but I can't speak to it.
Mr. Chair, can I
Sarah
speak
J.
briefly?
See, that's a segue for you.
I will say that I emailed the select board just a couple sentences clarifying a few things that I felt were unclear. I can send that to the group. The select board has not acted on it at all, but I sent them to Mr. Milano and Mr. Zoll.
Was that from the?
One thing,
Sorry.
what's that?
I'm sorry. Was that from the last iteration, or is there a different iteration of it?
From the last, from the one as of the night of town meeting with the 5 LUPs. Yeah, I took that version and added a couple sentences that I thought were clarifying. I can describe them if you want. The sentences I added were to say that, there's the 5 LUPs is light trespass. I tried to make it say, okay, if you're under 5 LUPs, you're not light trespassing. And if you're over, then it's up to the select board. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm getting us off topic. Maybe I should just let it rest as, I sent them a couple of sentences that I thought clarified things. I encourage other people on the warrant committee to do the same, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair. Just again, because, we don't want the back and forth.
Yeah, that's fine, Jay. Jay, it'd be great if you could send it to like me and Karen, just see what you wrote. And I'd suggest that of anybody, right? It needs to get better. So if you have a suggestion and you want to send it like Jay did, that would be great. But of course, as we know, like I got the feeling from town meeting that they were looking to pass that last time. So be mindful. Okay, I don't know. I'm thinking about voting on Wednesday. Do you want to talk right now? I mean, it's almost 9 o'clock. We could have a very quick meeting on Wednesday and maybe take up the overlay, a couple of the Chapter 60, the Chapter 59. I probably have some of the citizens petition language. We could discuss MBTA if you want. Just have a vote and like a general discussion meeting. If there are things you need from the town, you can tell me. I can shoot it to Nick. I'd like to maybe get a couple of volunteers for some comments too, just to help things out. But
Mr. Chair?
Sure, Judy.
Thank you. On the light trespass.
Sure.
It'll be interesting to see how, Jay tried to clean it up, some of the confusion. And I just wanted to say that if that fine system that they have in the one that went to the May town meeting is still in there, I have a lot of reservation about that. So you just said that you might, have a conversation with the select board, and instead of me emailing you that, I'm just saying it now, that I have a lot of reservation about that. I think it's, when our committee discussed the historic district, and there was enough comments from our committee about the fine structure on that. So now I'm thinking why there aren't more of us worried about the fine structure on this particular article. I think it's steep. I think there was no clarification on where to even go if you get this notice. And those are two things that caused me to pause on the light trespass. I am in favor of having such an article. So many towns have one. So why not us? However, those are concerns that I have, that if you are talking to somebody at the select board, that they might want to reconsider a little. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I?
Sure, absolutely,
speak to that
Jay.
a little?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, I sent some thoughts to the select board, and I thought about what Member Steele just said, which is, she expressed to me earlier that these fines were steep, and I considered suggesting that the select board change it from $100 a day to $100. Now it's, you get 45 days warning, and then you get another 30 days warning, but if you're still in violation, it's like $100 a day. And I thought of suggesting the select board change it to $100 a week. The reason I didn't suggest that is because I thought what's written in the warrant should be like the strictest. If the warrant says the fine is $100 a day, and we or town meeting change that to $100 a week, then that's in scope. But if it's, I don't know if you can go the opposite way. If you can print in the warrant, it's $100 a week, and then change it to $100 a day. So that's my convoluted thinking as to why I did suggest the select board change that. But while we don't want crazy changes on the town meeting floor or in the warrant, we could recommend, hey, we recommend everything word for word, exactly like what's printed in the warrant, except $100 a day should become $100 a week. That's something we might want to discuss as a committee, and I don't think it would impede the possibility of this passing. So, something to think.
And to just, if I could piggyback on Jay, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Jay, also, and committee, also what came up when we were doing the historic district is that some members were concerned there wasn't a cap. In other words, we put a cap on the fine, but there's no cap on this either. So technically, at $100 a day, by the time you found somebody to resolve this issue, because it's unclear where to go in the article, it's sort of like, well, I don't know, call Nick and figure it out. You could rack up another 30 days at $100 a day. That's $3,000 because you've got outdoor lighting that was determined was a trespass. Outdoor lighting that was determined, we don't know who's going there, even though most of the towns that surround us use their building department, building inspection department, and there's no clue who's going to go down to check out. There's just holes that aren't
Okay.
Jay, and that's $3 a month.
Yeah, one other thing I said, and I was getting way out over my skis because, writing bylaws is not a thing I do. But I also added a sentence, and the sentence I added said something to the effect of, if the owner is being fined and they take action to fix it, and they tell the select board, I took action to fix it, the fines stop accruing until the select board or their person gets out there and determines that they're still in violation. Now, that's as legally rigorous as, I'm not a lawyer at all, but I hear exactly what you're saying. I was thinking, if you're in this and you're getting $100 a day, how do you stop it? So I suggested that.
And there's no path. There's no path. And when you ask these questions, as we did that night that the article writer, who was a presenter, there were vague, in my mind, vague answers. Oh, the select board will take care of this. The select board. It's not like a place you can go during the day. I mean, they're not at town hall. They have meetings like we do. We're not at town hall every day.
Feels like it.
Where can a person go? Probably to Nick's office, because that's also the select board office, and say, look, here's a photo, I took it last night. The light's gone. I can't afford any more of this $100 a day. Would Nick put a stop on it? There are still so many questions. Again, not against having a trespass article, but I think there's more than what you put into a couple of sentences, Jay, which was good. I'm not saying that, but I think besides that, there are some problems with this article being clearly understood, how it will play out in everyday life. So I would love to see this article come back in the fall, where the select board can take all these somewhat, if you will, bullet points of where we see it can be better for the citizens to understand and try and comply with, and have it come back in the fall, which really is only, when you think about it, summer does go by fast, doesn't it? And next thing you know, we'll be raking leaves and figuring out where we stashed our fake Christmas tree. Okay. Thank you, David, for opening that conversation and helping us.
Thank you. I knew we couldn't get past this meeting without discussing late trespass. So committee.
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, it's all right, Judy. I knew it was going to happen. We have to talk about it. But, okay, we'll have a quorum on Wednesday? Okay? Well, quorum on Wednesday. So this is what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to vote on 2 out of the 3 that we heard tonight. If we get language back from Nick, maybe not. I'd like to vote on these. Like to vote on the overlay and maybe have a discussion about MBTA. And I don't know if we have to talk more about light trespass. It is what it is, but we can. But I'd just like to get these votes down, get some comments going, and then maybe talk about MBTA, at least the 10% plan.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to talk about that anyway, and we're gonna expect a comment from us. So we can at least do something, and I think it'll make our job easier a couple of weeks from now. Much easier.
Mr. Chair, I hate to jump in again. If we're going to talk about the 10% plan, I went to the town hall to get a better map of where the districts are in the 10% plan. And it didn't zoom in on each district to sort of, for me to get a sense of where it ended and where it started. There were no street names, etc. Do you think that will be available to us on Wednesday?
I can try to get a copy, Judy, of it. I haven't looked at the 10% plan myself yet, or the materials that Nick has put on the board.
Nick said, and again, I think I heard him correctly, that the map that I got on Friday was the only one they had. They didn't have the breakdown like in the 25%, where you took the yellow district is over here, but then there was a separate map just for the yellow district. And it sort of outlined, it starts at Brook Road, ends at Canton. You know what I'm trying to get at here. So there was a better visual of where the zoning was. And maybe check with Nick to see if he's got that in yet.
Yeah, I can do that this evening.
Well, I think Wednesday, by Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I will,
Sorry.
absolutely. No worries, Judy. Thank you. So is that good for a plan for everyone? Does that work? Gets us out early tonight. We can think about these additional questions, thoughts, discussion, vote. I really appreciate everyone coming in tonight. Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Oh, before that, I'd be happy to, whatever comments you need, I'd be happy to help you with that.
Thanks, Mace.
Yeah, let me know.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.